We're live. Hello, everyone. So we are here today, joined by Lisa Mo Wagner, to cover the topic on why it's worth to have a product manager on board. Hello, Lisa.
Hi.
Welcome. Hey. I think we can kick off with some icebreaker, like just to get the product management flow going. Uh, let's wait a little bit to see if people join. Meanwhile, we can have this slight question. Do you have any sort of favorite meme or joke, product management related?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know anything off the top of my head, but if anyone's interested in good product memes, there is an article out there from Anthony Murphy, who's like one of my favorite product people to write stuff. He writes a lot of really, really good content to learn from, but he also has the best product memes.
Okay, so we'll hopefully people will Google it. Anthony Murphy. I'll Google it afterwards because I'm a big uh, meme person, so I'll definitely check it out. Uh, Look, personally speaking, we can start a little bit with your story. Your LinkedIn goes something like this: I love being a product person. To me, it's the best job in the world, and here's why. So maybe we can kick off with that. What's so exciting about being a product manager?
Everything. But to be a little bit more specific, I just really, really enjoy the people I can work with because it's like such a diverse group of people. So I have designers that I work with and UX researchers and those kinds of people, where we really get into like how things look, how things work, and then I work with developers who are usually some of the smartest people I've ever worked with. Um, just on like coming up with technical solutions to things, but also having like really great ideas. That's something that I think is underrated sometimes, that engineers come up with really good ideas and they do have a sense for like, is this really good for the user or not? I get to work with business people who have tons and tons of ideas and like this really interesting domain expert knowledge. So I just, yeah, I get to work with a bunch of really smart people and talk to them like in my everyday job and collaborate. And so that's just really, really cool. And then at the end of the day, we actually build something that's out there. Like it's, I guess you can't touch it because it's software, but it's almost as good. So like you get to actually ship something and show it to people and be like, look, I made this, or like I was part of the team that made this, and it's really, really cool.
That's a super people focused answer. It's nice. It's a nice perspective. So, like, how's that helped you in the past? You've been a founder, a product owner, a product manager, and now a product manager, product management coach for a couple of companies, including Finiata, which is one of Netguru's clients. How was your journey? How would you describe it?
So I started out in product management accidentally, like most people who've been in the industry for a bit. You just kind of stumble into it, and then you're like, "Wait, this is a job. This is awesome." I started out as a head of support for a small startup that was building a marketplace, and I had some suggestions on the product. And then at some point, the founder just said, "Well, you know what? You just go and work with the developer, and you just do that stuff with him." And I was just like, "Okay, cool." And then it took a while until I actually found out that this is a real job that people have, and I guess the rest is history. That's how I got first into it, and I I like all of the ideas in product management, but also from like the different roles I've had, I've seen that like different companies do it differently and those kinds of things, and I learned a lot along the way, and that's how I ended up actually being more of a coach, or just like taking time besides full time gigs. With Vinyata, I would just work with them full time as a product manager. Um, but I've always kept the coaching on the side because I learned a lot from a lot of people around me, and so I kind of just like to pay it forward. Um, So even if I have a full-time employment contract, I will actually coach people on the side, and it's really rewarding because you see their progress, which is, I mean, that's just super fun to see people just really excel in what they're doing and loving it, just the same as I do because I love my job. Um, and so I've just never stopped the coaching.
Nice. Like you do it. I can see you do it out of pleasure, right? Even your description of product management is about
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
That's cool. Um, so like all of your transitions were super interesting. You know, like founding your own company, being a product owner, product manager, and then a coach. But if we could focus on the transition from product owner to product manager, especially because these two roles get confused and even used interchangeably. How would you describe the differences between these roles?
See, that's the thing. It really depends, right? Like I guess that's a product manager's favorite answer to anything. It depends. Um, what I've seen a lot is that they do get used interchangeably, and I would say between my product owner and product manager roles, there was not really actually a difference. Um, it was more so that companies chose to name that role product owner because they, for one of the places I worked at TELUS in Canada, they already have product managers because they're a 100-year-old telco, and product managers like literally manage the products that they sell. So, like for example, mobile phones. So they were like, well, we need these digital people that build websites and stuff and e-commerce, and well, I guess we'll just call them product owners. So in that regard, I was um, responsible for anything digital, while the product manager from the big corporation was responsible for the mobile phones, the plans. They had pricing managers, they had digital marketing managers. And so it was just like a whole group of people working together on these kinds of things. Personally, I kind of share the same view as Melissa Perry, who's an amazing product person who wrote a cool book that I recommend to everybody. Um, and she says, well, product management is the job, and then product owner is the role on the team that you might take. So I kind of like to look at it that way. I have seen companies that will say the product manager is the person that does all the business stuff, and then the product owner is the person to translate those into technical requirements. But I think, first of all, that gets boring. Like one of them will just end up being a scribe for the other. And I think it's what makes the job so fun, but also what really makes a good product manager is having both ends of these understandings, understanding the technical side of things and knowing how stuff gets implemented, working with the engineers, as well as understanding the business, working with the business partners and stakeholders to really understand like why we're doing some of the things that we're doing. Like you need both to actually come up with better solutions for your users that are the people that you then actually should focus on once you get the input from those other two.
Nice. So I think you got lucky if you have worked as a product owner, but actually in the role like you were performing the duties of a product manager, because it's not always like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's an awesome introduction, especially I think what you described there of being more technical or being more business focused. I think that's exactly the most common way that these two roles are viewed in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So if you manage to be a product owner that did both, I think I'm not sure about your experience, but from my experience, I think you got lucky.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So that's nice. Still speaking about your experience, are there any projects that you are most proud of?
I think one thing that I've worked on that was really, really cool is an e-commerce flow for the mobile phones that I just referenced. Because we had our stakeholder group, they were a little bit uncomfortable with all these like new ways of working that I was like, hey, should we try this? Let's do a design sprint. And now let's do this and that thing. And they're like, okay, sure, I guess. But they trusted us a lot and they were really involved in the process. And we came up with a really cool prototype that we tested, and then created an MVP, and really came up with really good steps to get from where we were to where we wanted to be. Um, and really were able to release small iterations, which sometimes we get a little bit lost in our solutions and try to like build the perfect thing, and then it takes quite a while until we release something. So that was actually really fun to go through the learning process with the stakeholders and business partners, as well as actually being able to really deliver incremental value, which is something that a lot of people talk about all the time. And it's what you read in the books and it's the best practice. But in reality, it doesn't actually happen that often that you get really into these small steps in most companies.
Nice. What about the opposite situation? Do you have a failure that you are proud of? It's kind of tough to be
Yeah.
proud of a failure, but
Well, I I know it sounds really cheesy, but I really like to say like either you succeed or you learn. Like that's really what I go by. So failure is still learning, and if you learn from it and do it better next time, was it really like a bad fail? Um, I think probably one of the biggest things was not as a product manager, but as a founder when I had my own little company. So it wasn't like a fancy tech startup or anything. It was just a very small business, very simple. I was a reseller of makeup products. I had a very specific customer segment, and I built a website. I built a shop. And it was great, and I loved doing all of it, and I did all the marketing and interactions with the people that were actually buying the things that I was selling, and it went really great for the first 6 months or so. But then it just kind of stopped, and I couldn't really figure out why and then what to do about it. And I had bought so many products because I was a reseller. So you just, you put all your money into the products, and then they sit on your shelf, and you're kind of, they can't really do much about it. Your liquidity is not great. So I said, well, I'm not ready to give up on this. So I started working part-time on the side, and I tried a bunch of different things. But after a few years, um, I realized, okay, this isn't working out. And so I started like working full-time again and just keeping it as a hobby. And then at some point I was like, okay, I really need to stop this now. Like this is too expensive for a hobby. And so I had to close down that shop, and it was really sad because it was like the first thing that I had ever like really done, where I made something and I put it out there and it did not work, and
yeah, it's like
it
your
was a bit
baby, right?
heartbreaking. Yeah, totally. So it took me, I think, 4 years until I finally completely shut it down. But I would do it all again because the amount of stuff I learned was insane.
So, how would your present self, as a product management coach, teach Lisa at that time? I'm curious.
Yeah,
Like it's
yeah.
it's an interesting story.
I think one of the biggest learnings that I've had since is like to work iteratively. As I just said, a lot of the time we don't actually do that so well in reality. But I probably should have started a lot smaller than I did. So I wanted to have this big shop that has like lots and lots of brands. So I was buying wholesale and I had to buy a lot of things. And also I did it all on my own. So I did everything myself, and I didn't have a co-founder. So what I would tell myself is go find a co-founder and then start small. Start with a prototype, see if people are actually interested. Like find a way to test this before you go all in and spend all of the money that you have on these things. And then just kind of work your way up from there. Because maybe I would have noticed that it was a good idea, but maybe it wasn't the time, because that's what I'm kind of thinking now. I don't think it was a bad idea. It's a shop. Like, how is selling stuff ever like a really bad idea? But it really wasn't the time, I think. So just learning and testing ideas out before you go all in, definitely the way to go.
I don't know how the demand for makeup was during COVID, but maybe COVID would have been a good time for it then. But yeah, but it's curious how you would coach yourself. That's nice. So like on that topic still, could you tell us what a product management coach does? Like, could you explain the audience what do you do on a day-to-day basis as a coach?
Yeah. So for the coaching, I'm actually right now only doing one-on-one coaching for individual product managers. Like that's what I'm doing right now because I'm working full-time at Mubity at the moment. And so in the one-on-one coaching, I really just work through things with the people that I coach. Most of the time, I use a framework called Grow, where you set a goal for the conversation that you're having, like whatever you want to solve, where you kind of feel stuck or you want some help on, like what do I want to accomplish in this session, and then we look through like what's the reality of the things, of the situation, what is happening, and just really try. Just even talking out loud about the reality of a situation often helps you to see some more angles that you didn't really look at when it was just in your head. And then we look at the options, like how can this be solved? How can you move forward with it? And then we wrap things up. So like all of these things spell out Grow, which is from the book, The Team That Managed Itself, or I think actually from somewhere else, but that's where I learned about it. And it's really great because at the end of the day, like sometimes people will just ask me, like, is there a framework for this and that thing? And then I'll just be like, well, there's this framework that I've used in the past that I liked. But most of the time, it's really just asking questions, and supporting them working through whatever they want to work through in that moment. And just seeing them being like, yeah, I can do this, and that thing. Because most of the time, people already have the tools and they have the tactical skills, the hard skills to solve their own problem. But sometimes they just get a bit stuck. I like to think about it like, when you think about something in your brain, like it's your head is round. So at some point your thoughts can only go in a circle and you need to just let them out so that they can take a new direction. And that's kind of what coaching is.
So you listen to people.
Yeah, a lot of the time, yes. And asking questions. Asking good questions is actually a skill in itself. That I worked hard on and I really had to learn. But yeah, mostly it's listening.
And who do you, I mean, besides the obvious target, product managers, who do you typically work with? Do you find people that are wanting to transition to that role, reach out to you for coaching? Or is it mostly product managers? And if you could describe different types or different in different industries, like who do you typically work with?
It's interesting. I have mostly actually worked with people who have been in product management before, but got to a level of role that they didn't feel comfortable anymore. Where they're like, I got to this next level and it's awesome and I love it because I got promoted and it's great because I did put a lot of hard work into it, but now I feel lost. So this is actually by just kind of getting to that next step. So it's more about like career progress with most of my coaches that I've worked with in the past, and less so people who are completely new. I've done that as well, where you talk to someone who's completely new to product management, where it is actually less about coaching and a lot about training. So that's where it kind of changes, and you have like parts coaching and then parts of like just training people and like letting them know about frameworks, about like ways of working, processes, etc. I like the coaching aspect more. It just gets me a bit more excited because you already have someone who has the base knowledge of product management, and you just see them grow and like get better at what they do. So that's something I really, really like. I have one coach, who's actually a friend now because we've been doing this for quite a long time, and we started out when she got promoted to senior product manager, and she said, I got promoted and it's great, but I don't feel ready at all. And I was like, no, you're ready. I know you are. Like, we've talked about product before. I'm very certain you are. And she's just like, no, I don't think I am. Like, I need some coaching. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. And now she's actually a product lead with 3 people on her team. And it's only been a bit over a year since she said, I'm not even ready for a senior role. And now she's actually a product lead and she's doing so great. And that's probably the most rewarding work you can ever do, at least in my book.
That's a great example. That's exactly like what I was looking for with the follow-up question. Do you feel that sometimes it's not so much the competence or the knowledge, it's more, in that case at least, it sounded a lot like the confidence was lacking as well? Do you feel
Mm-hmm.
like do you find yourself often not coaching people on the product management skills or competences, more on themselves?
Yeah, I would say so. It's more so confirming their tactical knowledge, like they know the frameworks and how things work and stuff, and just confirming that they're right. And a lot of the time, you just need a sparring partner. They're just like, oh,
Hmm.
I'm thinking to do this and that thing, and they don't have anyone in the company where they work that they can do that with. And so that also helps, where you're just like, hey, so I've had this idea. I want to do this and that. I want to set up the process like this. And this is the product. And this is like, I don't know, I'm thinking to do this type of user research. Do you think that makes sense? And you
Yeah,
usually just ask her, like, do you think that makes sense? And then you're just having a conversation, and that can be super helpful.
we do that quite a lot in our team. So I second that.
Yeah.
Um, Switching gears a little bit, are there any teams or companies that you admire, that you think they are great product companies?
Yeah. So one of them is Whereby. They're a video call platform. Um, Everything I've heard from them, which is more on the people side than the product management side, that I'm super, super excited about. But they are probably one of the most inclusive companies I've come across. Um, I did once apply there, and I got through all their interview process, but then it didn't work out in the end, which I'm still a little sad about. So if anyone sees it from Whereby, hit me up.
So that's why they're the best, right? They didn't take you.
No, but they have literally the most inclusive process I have ever been part of. Started with a job description that was so great and spoke to like, and really like you could see the effort in speaking to all kinds of people to apply, and also the way that they set up the process, and they gave feedback afterwards, but they let me um, book a time slot for them to give me feedback, so I could feel like, I'm ready for the feedback right now. Like, tell me what didn't work out for you. And so that was just a really great way to do that. When it comes to product, I think it also really depends. I mean, obviously we all know like Fang, and like people being like, oh yeah, I worked for Amazon or I worked for Google. And to be honest, I don't think those are the greatest product managers ever. They're probably very, very good. Like, I don't want to take anything away from them, but just because someone worked in a huge company like that, it doesn't like, Google is ridiculously large by now. You're working on like a teeny tiny part of the product, and so your experience is probably very, very, very different from someone who's the first product person on a startup, even though it might not be well known, and even though it might not actually make it. But you do quite different things. So I wouldn't say I look for specific companies, but I have people that I admire, and they might have worked in those companies, or also maybe not. Um, but yeah, I'd rather follow people and companies when it comes to like, oh, I want to learn something about product management. That's awesome.
That's a nice twist. So people, not companies, right?
Yeah, that's my thing,
Um,
people.
yeah, you're keeping consistency across the interview. Uh, so, how do you transform an organization from project minded to product minded? Like
I
from this sort
wish
of
I knew.
okay. I mean, you
um,
contribute to that, right? So you're coaching
yeah,
people.
no, for sure. And I've done like some workshops and things like that in the past as well, with companies, and like work on collaboration and co-creation. My personal approach to these kinds of things is experience, learn, use. So like you want to let people experience how a different way of working feels, because it's great if you tell everyone, oh, you should be doing things this and that way, and here's a book to go with it, have fun. This transformation is not going to work. But you want to let people experience it. So what I've done in the past is I will have, instead of having a meeting with my stakeholders, for example, which I also try to call them business partners, because stakeholders is like, we all have stakes in this. So I like the term business partners, because I like the business people, the ones with the pointy shoes and the nice suits, maybe, depending on where you work. But they're the business partners, right? And so I'll try to run small, quick workshops that are not usually longer than a normal meeting, but they are engaging and interactive. And that's already a difference. And where we come up with things together, or we'll share or let them partake in user research and those kinds of things. So I don't think I've ever gotten anywhere where the transition was or the transformation was that early that they had only projects and no product work at all yet. So I would usually be somewhere where there was at least the idea of, we want to be more product led, but we're not really sure how to do it. So yeah, let people experience it, and once they've experienced it at smaller scale, they're more likely to be okay with like something bigger scale. So we started
like an MVP,
with
sort of an MVP of transformation.
Yeah, pretty much. I think, I don't know who said that, but I know that other people said that too, where you have like a pilot team where you start doing things differently, and then other teams see it and they're like, oh, that seems to work. Like, what are they doing? So you kind of have this ripple effect throughout the organization. If you start somewhere small, it's like, especially if I work at the level of a product manager, if I try to just change the whole organization, that won't happen. I'm not in a position to do that, but I can change what happens in my team together with my team. I've had that also in my first role, where I had a really cool team, and I had just started in product management, and Agile was still new to me. So someone told me, and they're like, well, have you heard of Scrum? And I'm like, what is that? And I'm like, well, it's like, this framework for Agile working. I'm like, what's Agile? And so they like gave me a bit of a description, and I was like, oh, that sounds really smart. And so I read a bunch about it, but then I was like, well, I can't read about it forever, so I want to try things out. So I went to my team and I was like, yo, I read this thing. Do you have experience with it? And then I think one person was like, yeah, I've done that before in like another company. And I'm like, was it cool? And they're like, yeah, it was actually pretty good. And so we started trying things out together, and just went like, we basically incrementally implemented Scrum, like whatever we thought was like the next thing that would help us get even better would be the next part of Scrum that we implemented. So we did it quite different than most people do it, where they go all in and then they're just like, I'm so confused. And we're like, okay, we have sprints now. All right, we're doing a demo. Okay. All right. So we're doing, I don't know, the sprint planning properly. Oh, we're doing refinement meetings now. Let's do estimations, because that sounds
progressive change.
Yeah. And that worked really well for us. Yeah.
And how, Scrum, I mean, most companies now are working in some way, shape, or form in Agile, and Scrum is everywhere. But what do you see that nowadays is the most common challenge for product teams besides Agile and Scrum?
Yeah. I think it is discovery work. Because I think we've gotten to the point where delivery work is mostly understood because it does have Scrum. It does have this whole idea of like, oh, we're doing increments and whatnot. It might not always work, but we have the knowledge, and it's kind of at least on a base level implemented in a lot of companies. But what we don't have yet is discovery, talking to customers, not just implementing whatever the business wants. You have like maybe marketing and maybe account management or all those people, and they also know things about the customer. If you're lucky, you have sales and customer success that might know a lot about the customer that you can work with, if they're not too pushy, and so you can get like different perspectives. But at the end of the day, you still haven't talked to a user. So you might be a bit closer to your user, but you haven't actually talked to them. And that's the part that I still see a lot of people struggle with, which is like, well, marketing wants this feature, sales wants this other feature. I've had this idea and I love this idea because, we've all fallen in love with our ideas. So those are the three things you built this quarter. And then at the end of the quarter, you're like, success, because I shipped all of them.
Yeah,
But
but
do
you
you
didn't
really
talk
know if
to
you're
users.
successful? Yeah. And like, did it really make an impact? Did it really make a difference?
So there's
No.
continuous delivery is much more well known thing in the industry than continuous discovery. You just mentioned discovery. What are practical things that teams can do to start, just like you easing into it,
Yeah.
just like you did in the past with their team? What can product managers do with their teams? Of course, you spoke about involving other teams that are in touch with customers, but what else can they do themselves to
Yeah.
start implementing continuous discovery?
So I definitely think one of the first steps can be to really make sure you have a lot of interaction with customer success teams or anyone who's working very, very closely with the customer. That's better than nothing. Because, we also have to face that. The reality is, a lot of the time, people might not even be allowed to have access to customers. If you're in a B2B space, it's even harder because usually your customer base is a lot smaller than it would be in a B2C space. If you work in B2C, you can literally just go to the street and be like, hello, excuse me, ma'am. I have some questions. Do you have a moment? Do you want a Starbucks gift card? And then you can actually do an interview. If you're in the B2C space, like that's literally what I would suggest. Go get a pack of Starbucks gift cards or whatever works in your area, and go talk to people on the streets, and find out if the problem you're solving is really the problem that people are having. In the B2B space, it is a bit more tricky, but there are things like you can ask to sit in on calls, for example. So if your account managers or customer success managers or something, if they have calls, you might be allowed to sit in and listen. At least that way, it's not someone telling you about someone else's problem, but you listening to it. That's better than nothing.
Yeah, you can filter yourself, right?
Yeah. So there are options to get closer, and usually, I I have not been in a company in a really long time that said, "Oh my God, you can never talk to customers. Are you insane?" I know those are still out there. So to everyone who works in a company like that, I'm sorry. Um, but I think there are ways to get closer to that. There's a lot of this, talk to 2 customers a week, get kind of stuff out there. And I think that's a good goal to have, but also, be realistic about it. And if you do that and you're not really like good at or like experienced with discovery work and user interviews, you might actually do a different kind of bias where you're just like, well, I talk to 2 people every week. But then, it was holiday season, this and this and that thing happened, and then I kind of stopped again. But those 3 people that I talked to all said the same thing. So you get biased towards the 3 people you talk to, and maybe build what they said they would need, which still does not mean just because 3 people said it that, your thousands
That's
of
the
other
truth.
users will actually need it.
Yeah.
So you got to be a bit careful when you start out with these low numbers that you don't end up kind of, instead of listening to maybe the sales manager, now you're listening to that one customer you talked to. That's
So
not great yet either.
I think the way you mentioned you started implementing Scrum at the beginning of your career was very nice, because you read it, you knew the theory behind it, and then you started progressively implementing it and getting experience. So you just mentioned, you gave a very nice practical example of how discovery or continuous discovery can be implemented in a team, like start reaching out to customer support and hear 1 customer per week or 2 customers per week. But then this theory part is kind of missing, and you said that we can make mistakes and we can be biased. It's kind of tough. There's no Scrum book equivalent, but what would you advise for product managers to read? regarding continuous delivery?
Yeah. So definitely, there is a book out there that's literally called Continuous Discovery Habits. It's still pretty new. It's by Teresa Torres, who's done a lot of work. If you don't want to read a whole book, she has a blog that is really, really great. I've learned a lot from her, especially about discovery. That's definitely something I would recommend. And then I think generally not only about discovery, but general product work is Escaping the Bull Trap by Melissa Perry. That's just, yeah, one of probably my favorite product management book.
So I'm sure we can summarize all of the book. I think you've mentioned already 4 books during the call, 3, maybe 4.
Yeah,
So we
I
can
like
summarize
books.
at the end. We have also Piotr in the chat saying that Continuous Discovery by Teresa Torres is a must read for 2021. So
Yeah.
Everybody go check it out. When you're working with a new team or a new product, are there any red flags that you look for or issues that need fixing you can quickly identify? I'm not talking generally after being a month with a team, but as soon as you enter, what are the things you look for?
Well, something that I have started now actually asking already in the interview process, but this is also something to look into once you have the job, is how does work come into the team? So who decides what is being worked on in a product team? That will very quickly tell you if a company's product led or not. That will quickly show you if you're in more of a feature factory or like a build trap, where you just deliver features and then move on. I will quickly look into, okay, what kind of data analytics are available, because it gives me the same kind of information. Like if we really care about the outcomes of what we deliver, then there must be a way to measure this. And then also just seeing how the team communicates. For example, in Slack, something that I fairly recently really noticed and went, yeah, how many private channels are there? Like how did your new manager or someone had to add you to 15 private channels to talk about very normal business things? So they're not for, I don't know, we share really weird music with each other that nobody should know about, or we want to buy presents for someone who has their birthday soon. Those are probably the only 2 reasons you should have private channels. So that tells me a lot about how people communicate in that company, and if there's transparency or a lot of being secretive for no good reason. So that's definitely something. And then also the first retro that you attend, just seeing what is brought up there, and do people really bring things up? Do they speak freely? Is it really only just the same 2 people talking? Is everyone contributing? That can tell you a lot about team mechanics, psychological safety, and those kinds of things. None of these would make me run away, but there are definitely things where I would consider, okay, I should maybe bring that up with my line manager and see if there is a want for change, because I personally would think there is a need for change.
Nice. So 4 tips where to look at. I will add one in there and segue into the next question. I think the organizational structure, when you look at it, it can tell you loads about a company. What do you think are the roles that are needed in a product organization? And then what are the qualities of those roles?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So within a team, I think it is important that there is a design person. I am not a big fan of having 5 product teams and only 1 designer who's trying to help out everybody. That seems like it might not work. And there should be a product designer or UI UX designer, because I think most of the time you need a bit of both. And then you definitely need engineering management because I don't know, like you need someone to lead the engineers, and as the product person, that shouldn't be your job. And also a design lead, so that you can have like your product trifecta. You have like these two other people from these two adjacent disciplines where there should always be a healthy tension. So if those people don't exist, the tension isn't there, and so you might miss stuff. So if you're alone as a product manager and you don't have a design lead and a tech lead with you to work through problems and come up with solutions and like big picture strategy on all of these things, then it's a lot harder, and you might miss a lot of detail that these people help you see.
So on the team level, you have those three roles that I think are a must. If you go a level above, you mentioned your line manager. How do you see the structure of an organization should be above the teams? You mentioned having several teams. Of course, like startups are different from scale-ups, different from enterprises. What do you think? How should teams evolve, and how should that structure above the teams evolve as well?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I rarely see, but I think can be extremely helpful is organizing teams by outcomes. I've seen a lot of feature teams, which is also valid if you have a large product that you're like responsible for a certain part of the product. So you're assigned to a certain feature, and then you own all the outcomes that are connected to that feature. Or rather, there might be outcomes, and then you're like, well, with my feature, I can do this to help with this outcome. But I think actually rallying people around outcomes and goals gives them even more purpose, and allows for more innovative thinking. What I would never like, what I don't think I've ever seen that work well is teams based on technology. So you have a front end team and a back end team. Like that doesn't really work well. I've seen things like, oh, we have a team that manages the API of a certain part, and then a team that uses this API and builds the rest around it. That works, or that has worked in my experience, but also not the very best that it probably could have. So there's that. I definitely think there should be a head of product and then also a CPO if possible, just so that you have product have a seat at the table at those higher up levels, whatever you want to call them, or director of product or whatever. But to make sure that the product thinking is represented all the way up to the highest levels.
So you mentioned head of product or CPO, like different companies, those might even be two roles that are one after the other. What do you think should be the role of let's say a head of product that has several product teams below? Should that person be? I don't want to influence your answer. What do you think that are the best characteristics that person should have, and what should be their role?
Yeah. So the responsibilities I would see with the head of product are, big picture, strategy, driving outcomes, those kinds of things, coaching the product managers that report to them. So I would also see them as a people manager. And because they do the coaching, I feel like I have had line managers who were not in product before, so they didn't really know much about product. I personally prefer a line manager who has product experience. And so it kind of depends on the rest of the organization, the maturity of the organization, how product led they are, and what they need. So sometimes I might need someone to really coach the people on product management and processes and just understanding how the job gets done. Sometimes I need them to be more of a, person that has like this big picture strategy in mind and really like is innovative and rallies people around a common cause. because I think it was Marty Kagan who keeps saying like missionaries will outperform mercenaries like any day. So maybe you need someone to make all your product people into missionaries and not just swords for hire. So it kind of depends on what your organization needs. And also, for example, if you have a head of product and a CPO, it might be that one of them is the visionary while the other one is someone who's like really good at coaching and getting people to become the best product managers that they can.
Totally agree with those. So like being good at coaching, having some higher level of thinking, strategic thinking, and being a visionary. I think those are two super important things. And also, I want to highlight the fact that you mentioned teams should be organized around outcomes. I think that's a great way to tell if the company is mature or not in terms of product. So that's great. I have two more quick questions, and then we'll jump for questions from the audience. So we'll make them a bit quick. What do you think is the next big thing in product management?
I hope, and I've seen it a little bit, is more focus on soft skills. I like to call them strategic skills. I've learned that from another great product person, because strategic things are the ones that bring you to a long-term goal. So that's why I think soft skills or human skills are strategic skills. Having empathy and those kinds of things. I am seeing a bit of a trend towards like having product managers be more and more technical. And while I'm very, very tech savvy, I have a non-technical background. I studied sociology and business administration, so quite different.
It's aligned with being a coach.
Yeah, that's true. But I think like being super, super technical can actually even get in the way. So yeah, what I've been seeing more of is a focus on human skills, strategic skills, and being better at those. And as well as having more of an diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as ethical lens on product. Like, should I actually build this? Like, will this have a negative impact on some marginalized people? Those kinds of questions. It might be a bit my bubble, but I've been seeing more of that lately, and I like it, and I want to see even more of it.
Nice. And another quick one. So we've released an article called 100 Best Product Management Tools. What are your favorite product analytics, product development, product strategy, or productivity tools or frameworks?
Yeah. So I'm happy to do issue tracking wherever it's easiest. I'm not a fan of Jira. I think Jira has gotten too complex and too complicated. I've literally worked at a place where they outsourced Jira administration to a company that was doing exclusively that, which already tells me like, this is supposed to be a tool to help me. That's too big. That's too much. So like doing your issue tracking wherever your repository is for the delivery work works great. I think it's really important to have good written communication and have those things readily available. Personally, I really like Notion and how they've been doing things for that, for documentation, but also sharing things internally as well as externally. And then my favorite tool of all time probably is Mural for any type of visual collaboration. They are amazing. I love whiteboards and sticky notes in person. But if you want to have it online in a digital format, that's where I would go. I like Mural a little more than Miro. I think it's more intuitive. But that's just my personal experience. I think as long as you have a visual collaboration tool, you're pretty good. Figma for design, because it is very team inclusive. We have like all these team ways of working with it. So I think that's really good. Just make sure you have something to communicate directly with, like Slack and stuff like that.
I think that's a great list. We can focus on the physical whiteboard, so everybody can order one and just have them on the wall behind them and share.
I have like, can you see my door?
Oh yeah, I can.
I have like whiteboard like these magic whiteboard foil stuff on there so I can actually write on my door.
Nice. I mean, Ivo from our team also had a dream to have a whiteboard, and he has one now. So,
See,
yeah, that's a good
whiteboards.
one. We still have some time. I'm going to jump to some questions from the audience. So, Rafał is asking, what are the qualities of a great product manager?
Yeah, that's an easy question. No, it's not. I think being curious and passionate is really, really important. Having empathy, and that goes in all directions. So, like for your users, of course, but also for your team members and business partners. I think that's very important. Being humble. That's something I sometimes struggle with if I meet people who are not humble, who have a big ego and make it about themselves. So I think it's important to leave your ego at the door when you become a product manager. Give credit to your team if things work out well, and take responsibility if things don't work out. That's kind of how I see it, and I think having that automatically already gives you a lot of backing for psychological safety. And I think that's really important to be good at that. I think generally communication is extremely important, being good at that, being clear, being candid, very transparent, but also being really good at listening. Again, users, team members, stakeholders, for all of those. I think if you get those, you can learn any framework out there comparably easily. But if you got those strategic skills down, you're going to make a great product manager.
Nice. So that's why I think also that strategic skills and soft skills are the next big thing in product management. Agree on that. Mateusz Krawczynski, our practice lead, is asking, it still bugs me why so little companies align teams on the outcomes. It's a concept so old. What's stopping the companies?
Oof, yeah. If I had a perfect answer to that, I would probably write a book and be very rich. I assume that it's a bit of a fear of the new things, because we're used to producing productivity and stuff like that. But if I look at outcomes, I might not seem productive, which is like being productive is kind of like being busy. You just like churn out stuff and like, yay, features. And we're used to that. And a lot of our management principles come like from back in the day when like factories were the thing. So I think, yeah, just committing to something so different and opening yourself up for a different type of failure that you're unfamiliar with just is very, very uncomfortable. It's like if you don't launch something on time, then you launch it 2 weeks late and you're like, I'm sorry, I'm late. And that's it. We're kind of used to that already. But if you say, well, this is the type of success I'm going for, and then you fail at that hurts a lot more than just being like, oh, sorry, I was late because, people were sick. So it wasn't really my fault. Like I don't know. There's an easier out, I feel like. Less responsibility at the end of the day, in a way. But yeah, I don't know. What is stopping companies?
Mateusz is saying, please do. I think he refers to write the book. So there's a request and a challenge at the same time.
All right. Maybe.
So Zoshe is asking, technical skills are being able to lead a cross-functional team cooperation or cross-team cooperation is definitely essential in the role of a product manager, but how would you define the importance of emotional intelligence and empathy when it comes to developing a project?
Yeah, I already kind of touched on that. I think emotional intelligence is like the base, like the foundation that you need as a product manager. And once you got that base down, those things like, leaving your ego at the door, having empathy to everybody that you work with in one way or another kind of comes to you. I think it's one of those things that is really hard to teach if you don't have it at all. You can train it, but you can practice it. You can be mindful about it and get better at it. But just learning it from like, I don't know, from zero kind of feels almost impossible. So I think it is super, super important. I'll give you another book recommendation on this topic, which is Hiring Product Managers from Kate Leto. She talks a lot about emotional intelligence, empathy, and like all kinds of soft skills, human skills, and how they are important and how you can assess them when you hire product managers. I personally would always hire someone who shows, a rather high EQ and a lot of empathy in their work than someone who has worked at one of the fancy companies, or someone who, can tell me every single detail from the Scrum Guide and how OKRs work perfectly. Always take someone emotionally intelligent over that.
Nice. There you go. Another book recommendation. If someone can summarize it on the chat. We have another question from a LinkedIn user. What would be your recommendation for job hunting to those who want to become a product manager after being at an executive management role? For example, worked in a failed startup as a CXO role, and now are trying to find a job as a product manager or a product owner.
Mm-hmm. I think something that might make someone a little hesitant hiring you if you were at a C level into a much lower role is probably, the way you work is very different. You have responsibilities, but also, things that you can do that you cannot do as a product manager. So I think kind of working out in your CV or maybe a cover letter or something, like how the things you learned in this failed startup on that level will make you a really good product manager will probably help. Generally, I have found product management is definitely also one of those careers where good networking can help you a lot. So I would also suggest to generally network. I've been doing this for years. I know so many people by now, and I've found that the product management community is probably one of the most supportive. Like whenever I had something where it's just like, oh my God, I just need someone to talk to. Please, somebody help me with this. Like someone will reach out on LinkedIn or Twitter and be like, yo, what's up? What do you need? And just help. And I do the same. Like if someone asks me for help, I'll be like, yep, hit me up. I'll talk with you about it. Let's see. So I think networking and really making it obvious that your learnings will help you as a PM should help you in job hunting.
I will also give my 2 cents on that because I was in that situation. So Netguru and other companies, I'm sure, hire people that had startups. A lot of the skills of having a startup are actually required for the role of a product manager. So I think it's what Lisa said. If you tailor your CV to highlight those learnings that are common, and if you are humble, just like you said, and honest about what you know and what you don't know, and you're willing to learn, there will be companies that will hire you. We are hiring a lot of product managers. We definitely go for the soft skills, and we hire people that are willing to learn. But so I would say it's a strength. You just need you need to turn it into a strength, and especially when you're pitching or being interviewed, don't waste a lot of time speaking about your non-product related experiences. Just speak about those experiences that are specific about product. So I had to drop my 2 cents there because I've been there. So I think I understand what this person is going through. Lisa, thank you a lot for coming. We're on the dot. We have to finish. So it was a pleasure having you here and talking to you. I hope we can repeat it sometime. And best of luck. If you want to give any shout out, go ahead.
I don't think I have any shout outs or anything. Let me just think for 1 second before we have to turn everything off. I'll be speaking at other things as well. So especially if you're interested in strategic skills more, I have some upcoming talks. Maybe just follow me on LinkedIn or send a request. I'm happy to connect. Also, always happy to answer any kind of questions. So feel free to ask me about book recommendations and other things. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This was a really fun talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Everyone, have a nice week.